The Silent Guardians. The vast expanse of space had never seemed so threatening to Admiral Zexthor of the Galactic Confederation. As he stood on the bridge of his flagship, the Eternal Glory, his compound eyes scanned the holographic display of the Orion Arm, where dozens of red markers indicated ongoing battles. The war against the humans had been raging for 3 standard galactic years, and what had started as a simple subjugation mission had turned into a nightmarish struggle for survival. Zexthor's mandibles clicked nervously as he focused on a particular sector. Planet D4721, a seemingly insignificant ball of rock and ice on the fringes of human space, had become a focal point of the conflict. The Confederation forces had been trying to establish a foothold there for months, but their efforts had been consistently thwarted by an unseen enemy. Status report on D4721, Zexthor commanded, his voice a low rumble that carried across the bridge. A junior officer, a lithe Centaurian with iridescent skin, approached with a data pad. "Sir, we've lost another 3 battalions in the last solar cycle. Our ground forces report difficulties." Zexthor's antennae twitched in irritation. Difficulties. We outnumber them 10 to 1. What possible difficulties could they be facing? The junior officer hesitated, his skin shifting to a pale blue. "It's the human snipers, sir. Our troops are being picked off from impossible distances. They never see or hear the attack coming." The Admiral's exoskeleton creaked as he clenched his claws. Human snipers. The very phrase had become a source of dread throughout the Confederation ranks. When the war began, the various species of the Galactic Confederation had looked down upon humanity as primitive and barbaric. Their projectile weapons seemed quaint compared to the energy weapons and gravity manipulators used by more advanced races. But now, those same primitive weapons had become the stuff of nightmares. "Show me the latest footage," Zexthor ordered, turning to the main view screen. The screen flickered to life, showing a barren landscape of jagged rocks and ice fields. A group of Confederation soldiers, a mix of reptilian draconians and insectoid vespids, moved cautiously across the terrain. Their armor, designed to withstand energy blasts and gravitational distortions, gleamed dully in the light of the system's distant sun. For a moment, all seemed calm. Then, without warning, one of the draconian soldiers collapsed, a small hole punched clean through his helmet. The others scrambled for cover, their movements panicked and uncoordinated. Another shot rang out, and a vespid fell, its wings twitching futilely. The recording continued for several more minutes, showing the systematic elimination of the entire squad. Not once did the camera catch a glimpse of the attacker. Zexthor felt a chill run through his body, despite the temperature-regulated environment of the bridge. "How is this possible?" he muttered, more to himself than to his officers. No species should be able to achieve such accuracy at those distances, especially not in these atmospheric conditions. The junior officer spoke up again, his voice barely above a whisper. "There are rumors, sir. The troops are saying that human snipers can bend the very fabric of space-time, that they can see heat signatures through solid objects and predict the future." "Nonsense," Zexthor snapped, but there was a tremor of uncertainty in his voice. "They're using some kind of technology we haven't encountered before. That's all." But deep down, the Admiral wasn't so sure. The humans had proven to be far more resourceful and adaptable than anyone had anticipated. Their snipers seemed to operate on a level that defied conventional understanding of physics and biology. As if to underscore this point, a communication channel suddenly opened on the bridge. The holographic form of General Klar, commander of the ground forces on D4721, materialized before them. The general's typically stoic demeanor was gone, replaced by barely contained panic. "Admiral," Klar's voice crackled through the channel, "we're abandoning the primary base. The humans, they're everywhere and nowhere. We can't fight an enemy we can't see." Zexthor's eyes widened in shock. "Control yourself, General. You can't abandon your position. The entire sector will be vulnerable." "You don't understand," Klar insisted, his image flickering as explosions sounded in the background. They're not just killing us. They're demoralizing us. My best warriors are cowering in bunkers, too afraid to move. The humans don't even need to shoot anymore. The mere thought of their snipers is enough to paralyze our forces. As the Admiral watched in horror, the transmission cut out abruptly. The bridge fell silent, the weight of the situation pressing down on every being present. Zexthor turned to his strategic advisor, a quantum AI housed in a crystalline matrix. Analysis, he demanded. The AI's voice was cool and detached. The human snipers represent a paradigm shift in warfare. Their effectiveness goes beyond mere marksmanship. They have achieved a level of psychological dominance that is unprecedented in galactic history. But how? Zexthor pressed. How can a handful of humans with primitive projectile weapons bring the might of the Confederation to its knees? It is not the weapons themselves, but how they are used, the AI responded. Human snipers operate on principles that challenge our understanding of combat. They combine patience, precision, and unpredictability in ways that our forces are ill-equipped to counter. The Admiral's mind raced, trying to grasp the implications. He had always viewed warfare as a numbers game, a contest of technology and resources. But the humans had turned it into something else entirely. Their snipers weren't just soldiers. They were shadow. They were fear itself. We need to adapt, Zexthor said finally, his voice firm with renewed determination. If we can't beat them at their own game, we'll change the rules. Prepare a task force. We're going to study these human snipers, learn their secrets, and find a way to neutralize them. As the bridge erupted into activity, Zexthor turned back to the holographic display of the galaxy. The human territory, once seen as a minor annoyance on the fringes of civilization, now loomed like a malevolent shadow. The Admiral realized that everything had changed. This was no longer a war of conquest. It was a fight for survival against an enemy that had mastered the art of dealing death from afar. In the vast, cold expanse of space, a new legend was being born. The human sniper, a bogeyman that haunted the dreams of alien soldiers across 1,000 worlds. And as news of their exploits spread, a question began to echo through the corridors of power in the Galactic Confederation. How do you fight an enemy you never see coming? The answer, Zexthor feared, might determine the fate of entire civilizations. The hunt begins. The command center of the Confederation's newly formed anti-sniper task force buzzed with activity. Holographic displays flickered with data streams, and beings from a dozen different species huddled around workstations, their voices a cacophony of clicks, whistles, and guttural sounds. At the center of it all stood Commander Vexna. Her sinuous, cephalopod-like body coiled tightly with tension. Her large, luminous eyes scanned the room, taking in every detail. As the foremost expert on human psychology in the Confederation, she had been handpicked by Admiral Zexthor to lead this desperate initiative. Report, she commanded, her tentacles rippling with bioluminescent patterns that conveyed urgency. The quantum AI interface pulsed to life before her. Analysis of recent engagements shows a 73% increase in effectiveness of human sniper tactics. Confederation forces are experiencing unprecedented levels of combat stress and paranoia. Vexna's skin darkened with concern. And our countermeasures? Largely ineffective, the AI responded. Attempts to use heat-sensing technology have been thwarted by advanced camouflage. Psychic probes are blocked by unknown means. Even our most advanced predictive algorithms fail to anticipate their movements. The commander's tentacles curled in frustration. How could a species so young, so new to the galactic stage, possess such devastating capabilities? Show me the Epsilon 9 incident, she ordered. The main holo display came to life, projecting a three-dimensional image of a barren moon. Confederation forces were engaged in what should have been a routine operation to secure a strategic outpost. But as Vexna watched, the scene unfolded into chaos. One by one, soldiers fell to unseen attackers. Energy shields designed to stop plasma bolts proved useless against the hypervelocity projectiles of the human snipers. The Confederation troops, panicked and disoriented, began firing wildly into the empty landscape. "Freeze image," Vexna commanded. "Enhance Sector 7G." The hologram zoomed in on a rocky outcropping. For a moment, there was nothing to see. Then, almost imperceptibly, a shadow moved. "There," Vexna whispered, her voice filled with a mix of dread and admiration. "That's our ghost." The image sharpened, revealing the outline of a human figure, nearly invisible against the terrain. The sniper's suit seemed to shift and change, perfectly mimicking the surrounding rocks. "How is this possible?" a junior analyst asked, his antennae quivering. Vexna's eyes narrowed. "Adaptive camouflage, far beyond anything we've encountered. It's not just visual. It must also mask heat signatures and disrupt our sensory equipment." As the team studied the image, trying to glean any information they could, an alert sounded. A new transmission was coming in from the front lines. "Put it through," Vexna ordered. The holographic face of a draconian field commander materialized, his scaled features etched with fear. "Command, we've lost contact with Outpost Gamma 12. No distress signal, no signs of battle. They're just gone." Vexna felt a chill run through her body. An entire outpost vanished without a trace. That's not possible. But even as she said it, she knew it was. The human snipers had evolved from mere soldiers into something else entirely. They were hunters, ghosts in the machine of war, striking with a precision and stealth that defied explanation. "Deploy recon drones to Gamma 12, she ordered. "Full spectrum analysis. I want to know everything, down to the quantum level if necessary." As the command center burst into action, Vexna retreated to her private chamber. She needed to think, to approach this problem from a new angle. The old ways of warfare were clearly obsolete in the face of this human threat. In the quiet of her room, surrounded by bubbling tanks of the nutrient-rich fluid her species required, Vexna accessed the classified human files. She had studied their history, their conflicts, trying to understand the mind of these terrifying snipers. What she found both fascinated and horrified her. Humans had been perfecting the art of long-range killing for centuries. Their snipers were more than just soldiers. They were elite operatives, trained to operate alone for extended periods, to become one with their environment. But there was something else, something that set the human snipers apart from anything the Confederation had encountered before. It wasn't just their technology or their training. It was their mindset, a unique combination of patience, adaptability, and an almost preternatural instinct for survival. Vexna's musings were interrupted by an urgent message. The recon drones had returned from Gamma 12, and the data they brought back was impossible. She rushed back to the command center, her tentacles propelling her with urgent speed. The main holo-display showed the outpost, seemingly intact. But as she watched, the image shifted, revealing the truth. The entire outpost had been hollowed out, its inhabitants removed with surgical precision. There were no signs of forced entry, no evidence of a firefight. It was as if the human snipers had simply reached in and plucked out their targets, leaving an empty shell behind. "How?" Vexna breathed, her luminous eyes wide with disbelief. The Quantumized voice was somber. "Unknown, Commander. Our current understanding of physics and biology cannot explain this level of infiltration and extraction." For the first time since taking command of the task force, Vexna felt true fear. The human snipers weren't just soldiers anymore. They had become something more, something that challenged the very laws of nature as the Confederation understood them. As she stared at the holographic image of the empty outpost, a chilling thought occurred to her. What if the human snipers weren't just targeting individual soldiers or outposts? What if their true goal was to undermine the very fabric of Confederation society, to sow fear and doubt on a galactic scale? "We need to change our approach," Vexna announced, her voice carrying across the stunned silence of the command center. We've been trying to fight these human snipers on their terms. It's time we set the rules of engagement." She turned to her team, her bioluminescent patterns pulsing with determination. "I want new strategies, ones that don't rely on direct confrontation. We need to think like them, to anticipate their moves before they make them." As her staff scrambled to comply, Vexna couldn't shake the feeling that they were missing something crucial. The human snipers had elevated their craft to an art form, blending technology, skill, and an almost mystical connection to their environment. To beat them, the Confederation would need to do more than just develop new weapons or tactics. They would need to understand the human mind, to grasp the essence of what made these snipers so lethal. Little did Vexna know, at that very moment, light years away, a human sniper was preparing for a mission that would change the course of the war. In the cold, unforgiving vacuum of space, a small stealth ship drifted silently. Its hull, covered in light-absorbing materials, was nearly invisible against the backdrop of stars. Inside, a lone figure sat in meditation, his breathing slow and controlled. Sergeant Jack Harper, callsign Whisper, was the embodiment of everything the Confederation feared. A veteran of 100 battles, he had honed his skills to a razor's edge. But it wasn't just his marksmanship that made him legendary. It was his ability to become one with his environment, to move unseen and unheard through the most hostile territories. As he opened his eyes, the ship's AI spoke softly. "Approaching drop zone. Whisper. Confederation forces have no indication of our presence." Jack nodded, rising to his feet with fluid grace. He checked his rifle, a marvel of human engineering that could punch through Confederation armor at distances that seemed impossible. But the weapon was just a tool. The real power lay in the mind of the sniper who wielded it. As he prepared for the drop, Jack reflected on the nature of his role in this war. He wasn't just a soldier. He was a symbol, a ghost story that kept alien commanders awake at night. The fear he and his fellow snipers instilled was as much a weapon as any bullet. Initiating drop sequence, the AI announced. The floor beneath Jack's feet opened, and he fell into the void. His suit, a masterpiece of adaptive camouflage and sensory dampening technology, immediately began to shift, matching the patterns of light and darkness around him. As he plummeted towards the surface of a Confederation-held world, Jack felt a sense of calm wash over him. This was where he belonged, in the space between heartbeats, in the silence between breaths. He was the hunter, the unseen predator, and the entire galaxy was his hunting ground. The mission ahead was daring, perhaps even impossible by conventional standards. But Jack knew that in this new era of warfare, the impossible had become routine. He would strike at the heart of the Confederation's command structure, sowing chaos and fear in ways that no frontal assault ever could. As he neared the planet's surface, prepared to infiltrate one of the most heavily guarded facilities in the galaxy, Jack allowed himself a small smile. The hunt was on, and the galaxy would never be the same. Back in the Confederation Command Center, alarms began to blare. Something had breached their most secure perimeter, but the sensors couldn't pinpoint what or where. As panic began to spread, Vexna realized with growing horror that they were witnessing the opening moves of a game they didn't yet know how to play. The human snipers had brought the war to a new level, and the fate of civilizations hung in the balance. The hunt had indeed begun, but who was truly the predator, and who was the prey? Shadows and whispers. The Confederation High Command bunker on planet Saraxis was supposed to be impenetrable. Buried deep beneath the surface of a lifeless moon, shielded by layers of energy fields and matter disruption barriers, it was considered the safest place in the galaxy. Yet, as alarms blared and panic spread through its winding corridors, that illusion of safety shattered like glass. General Krasnor, Supreme Commander of the Confederation forces, stared at the holographic displays with a mixture of disbelief and terror. One by one, the security checkpoints were going dark. No explosions, no firefights. They simply winked out of existence as if they had never been there. "It's impossible," he muttered, his scaled skin turning a sickly shade of green. Nothing could have penetrated our defenses. But deep down, he knew what this meant. The humans had somehow done the impossible. They had sent in their ghost, their nightmare, a sniper. Miles away, concealed in the shadow of a jagged rock formation, Sergeant Jack Harper observed the chaos unfolding within the bunker through his advanced optical interface. His lips curled into a slight smile. Phase 1 of the operation was complete, saw fear and confusion. Jack's mission wasn't just about eliminating key targets. It was about breaking the will of the Confederation, about turning their own paranoia against them. And so far, it was working perfectly. He watched as Confederation troops scrambled in panic, firing at shadows and turning on each other in their desperation to find the intruder. But there was no intruder to find. At least, not yet. Jack had deployed a network of microdrones, each no larger than a grain of sand. These tiny marvels of human engineering could bypass even the most sophisticated security measures, projecting false heat signatures and disrupting communication networks. To the Confederation, it would seem as if a ghost army had infiltrated their most secure facility. The truth was far more terrifying. It was just one man, armed with technology and training that bordered on the supernatural. Inside the bunker, General Krasnor was quickly losing control of the situation. His most elite guards were reduced to trembling wrecks, jumping at every shadow and echo. "Pull yourself together," he roared, slamming his fist on the command console. "It's just one human. Find him and kill him." But even as he said it, Krasnor knew it wasn't that simple. The human snipers had become more than just soldiers. They were bogeymen, the stuff of nightmares. How do you fight an enemy you can't see, can't hear, can't even comprehend? As if in answer to his unspoken question, a voice crackled over the communication system, a human voice, calm and almost amused. "General Krasnor," it said, the words sending chills down the spines of everyone in the command center. "I believe we need to have a conversation about the future of this war." Krasnor's eyes widened in shock. The human had penetrated their most secure communications channel, as if it were an open frequency. "Who are you?" the general demanded, trying to keep the tremor out of his voice. "What do you want?" There was a pause, and then the voice spoke again. "Who I am doesn't matter. As for what I want you to understand the futility of your actions. This war you've started, it's already over. You just don't know it yet." In his hidden vantage point, Jack allowed himself a grim smile. Psychological warfare was as much a part of a sniper's arsenal as any rifle. He watched through his optical feed as the Confederation leaders huddled together, their fear palpable even from this distance. "You're bluffing," Krasnor said, but there was no conviction in his voice. "You're just one human. You can't defeat an entire galactic civilization." Jack's response was calm, almost philosophical. "General, you're thinking in terms of numbers, of conventional warfare. But this isn't a conventional war. We're not here to conquer you or destroy you. We're here to show you the error of your ways." As he spoke, Jack was on the move. Using his suit's adaptive camouflage, he scaled the sheer rock face of the moon's surface, making his way towards a hidden entrance to the bunker. His movements were fluid, silent, more like a ghost than a man. Inside the command center, Krasnor and his staff were coming undone. The humans' words had struck at the very core of their beliefs, their understanding of warfare and galactic politics. "What do you mean? Show us the error of our ways," one of the junior officers asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Jack's voice came through once more, tinged with something that might have been pity. "You started this war because you thought we were weak, primitive. You saw our worlds as easy conquests. But in doing so, you awakened something you couldn't possibly understand." As he spoke, Jack reached the hidden entrance. With a few deft movements, he bypassed the security systems and slipped inside. The Confederation's most secure facility had been breached, and they were none the wiser. Humanity has been fighting itself for millennia. Jack continued, his voice echoing through the bunker's communication system. We've honed the art of warfare to a degree you can't comprehend. And now, thanks to you, we're united against a common enemy. Krasnor felt a chill run down his spine. He had read the reports on human history, had dismissed them as the violent thrashings of a primitive species. But now, faced with the reality of what humanity could do when pushed, he began to understand the magnitude of his error. "What do you want from us?" the general asked, his voice hoarse with fear. Jack's response was immediate: withdrawal. Complete and unconditional. Leave human space, never to return, or face the consequences of your actions. As he spoke, Jack was moving through the bunker's corridors, a shadow among shadows. The Confederation troops, panicked and disoriented, never even noticed him passing by. In the command center, Krasnor's staff looked to him for guidance. But the general was lost, his certainty shattered by the realization of what they were truly facing. "And if we refuse?" Krasnor asked, already dreading the answer. There was a long pause, and then Jack's voice came through one last time. "Then we will dismantle your civilization, piece by piece, not through open warfare, but through fear. We will be the shadow at your back, the whisper in the dark. You will never know peace, never know safety. Your own paranoia will tear you apart." As the words faded, the lights in the command center flickered and died. When they came back on seconds later, everyone froze in horror. Standing in their midst, as if he had materialized from thin air, was a human figure. Jack Harper, the nightmare made flesh, stood before them. His adaptive camouflage shifted and swirled, making him seem almost insubstantial, like a living shadow. "The choice is yours, General," Jack said, his voice no longer coming through the speakers, but echoing in the stunned silence of the room. "Peace or annihilation. We'll await your decision." And then, as suddenly as he had appeared, he was gone. The most secure facility in the Confederation had been infiltrated, its leaders confronted, and not a single shot had been fired. As alarms blared and troops rushed in, Krasnor sank into his chair, the weight of the galaxy seeming to press down upon him. The human snipers had changed everything. This wasn't a war anymore, it was a reckoning. Miles away, back at his hidden vantage point, Jack Harper allowed himself a moment of satisfaction. The mission was complete, and the message had been delivered. Now, it was up to the Confederation to decide their fate. As he prepared for extraction, Jack couldn't help but reflect on the nature of his role in this conflict. He and his fellow snipers were more than just soldiers now. They were the embodiment of humanity's resolve, of its capacity for both mercy and terrible retribution. The galaxy had underestimated humanity, had sought to conquer what they didn't understand. Now, they would learn the true cost of their mistake. The age of conventional warfare was over. In its place, a new era had dawned. An era where shadows held more power than fleets, and whispers could topple empires. As Jack's extraction ship broke atmosphere, leaving the shaken Confederation leaders to ponder their future, he allowed himself a grim smile. The hunt wasn't over, it had only just begun. And humanity, for better or worse, would never be underestimated again. The turning point. The news of the Thoraxis incident spread through the Confederation like wildfire. What was once a unified galactic power began to fracture under the weight of fear and uncertainty. Some called for immediate surrender, while others demanded an escalation of the war effort. In the midst of this chaos, the human snipers continued their shadow campaign, striking with surgical precision at key targets across Confederation space. On the Confederation capital world of Zenthar, the Supreme Council convened in an emergency session. The chamber, usually a model of order and decorum, now buzzed with tension and barely contained panic. High Counselor Vexlora, her iridescent scales shimmering with agitation, called the session to order. "Esteemed colleagues," she began, her voice carrying a tremor she couldn't quite conceal, "we face an unprecedented crisis. The humans have demonstrated capabilities that defy our understanding of warfare. We must decide on a course of action, and we must do so now. As debates raged and tempers flared, a lone figure watched from the shadows of the council chamber. Major Sarah Chen, one of Earth's most decorated snipers, had infiltrated the very heart of Confederation power. Her mission was not to assassinate or sabotage, but to observe and report. The fate of the war, and perhaps of humanity itself, would be decided here today. Meanwhile, light years away, the largest battle of the war was about to begin. The Confederation, in a desperate bid to regain the initiative, had amassed a vast armada for an all-out assault on the human colony world of New Horizon. It was to be a show of overwhelming force, a statement that the Confederation would not be cowed by shadow tactics and psychological warfare. Little did they know, humanity was prepared. As the Confederation fleet dropped out of hyperspace near New Horizon, they were met with an eerie silence. No defensive platforms fired, no enemy ships moved to intercept. The planet below seemed peaceful, almost serene. Admiral Kronax, commander of the Confederation fleet, felt a chill run down his spine. This wasn't right. Where was the resistance? Where was the human fleet that intelligence had assured him would be here? "Full scan of the system," he ordered, his voice tight with tension. "I want to know where they're hiding." But the scans showed nothing out of the ordinary. New Horizon appeared to be defenseless, ripe for the taking. And that, more than anything, terrified the Admiral. As the Confederation forces began their approach to the planet, the trap was sprung. From the dark side of New Horizon's moon, a swarm of stealth ships suddenly decloaked. But these weren't ordinary warships. They were carriers, each one housing dozens of one-man fighter craft. And piloting each of these fighters was a human sniper. The comms channels erupted with panicked chatter as the human fighters engaged. These weren't dogfights in the traditional sense. The human pilots employed the same hit-and-run tactics that had made their ground-based counterparts so feared. One moment, a Confederation cruiser would detect a fighter on its sensors. The next, a precision strike would cripple its engines or weapon systems. The human pilots seemed to dance between the stars, appearing and disappearing at will, striking with impossible accuracy before vanishing into the void. Admiral Kronax watched in horror as his mighty fleet was slowly dismantled, piece by piece. "This is impossible," he muttered, his hands gripping the command console so tightly that his claws left grooves in the metal. "They're just fighters. How can they be doing this?" The answer, of course, lay in the unique skills of the human snipers. Their training, honed through centuries of conflict, allowed them to perceive patterns and weaknesses that others missed. Combined with the advanced stealth technology of their craft, they had turned space itself into their hunting ground. As the battle raged, Major Chen continued her silent observation of the Confederation Council. The news of the fleet's decimation had just reached them, and the chamber had descended into chaos. "We must sue for peace," one counselor shouted, his tentacles writhing in agitation. "We cannot hope to defeat an enemy we cannot even see." "Coward," another retorted. "We outnumber them 100 to 1. We cannot let fear dictate our actions." High Counselor Vexlora raised her hands for silence. "We must consider all options," she said, her voice strained. Perhaps we have misunderstood the humans. Perhaps there is room for negotiation." From her hidden vantage point, Sarah allowed herself a grim smile. The seeds of doubt that she and her fellow snipers had planted were beginning to bear fruit. The Confederation, for all its technological might and numerical superiority, was beginning to realize the futility of their aggression. Back at New Horizon, the battle had turned into a rout. The Confederation fleet, once proud and mighty, was now a scattered, broken force. Those ships that could still maneuver were in full retreat, leaving their crippled comrades behind. As the last of the enemy ships fled the system, the human fighters regrouped. Among them was Sergeant Jack Harper, the same sniper who had infiltrated the Confederation bunker on Xeraxis. "All units, report in," he called over the comms. One by one, his fellow snipers checked in. Their losses had been minimal. a testament to the effectiveness of their tactics and technology. As the adrenaline of battle began to fade, Jack allowed himself a moment of reflection. This victory, as decisive as it was, wasn't about destroying the enemy. It was about sending a message, about demonstrating the futility of conventional warfare against an unconventional foe. "Command, this is Whisper," Jack radioed to the Planetary Defense Headquarters. "Operation Checkmate is complete. The Confederation fleet has been routed." The response came back almost immediately, tinged with a mix of relief and awe. "Understood, Whisper. Outstanding work, all of you. Return to base for debrief." As the fighters began their descent towards New Horizon, news of the battle's outcome was spreading across human space. Cheers erupted on 100 worlds as the population realized that they had not only survived but triumphed against overwhelming odds. But in the upper echelons of human military command, the mood was more somber. They knew that this victory, while significant, was just one battle in a larger war. The real challenge lay ahead, convincing the Confederation to end hostilities for good. On Zentvar, the Confederation Council had finally reached a decision. High Counselor Vexlora, her scales now a dull gray from stress and exhaustion, addressed her colleagues. "We have underestimated the humans at every turn," she said, her voice heavy with resignation. "Our attempts to subjugate them have only awakened a sleeping giant. If we continue this war, it will not be a question of victory or defeat, but of survival itself." She paused, looking around the chamber at the faces of her fellow counselors. Fear, uncertainty, and a dawning realization were reflected in their eyes. "I propose," Vexlora continued, "that we immediately cease all hostilities against humanity. Furthermore, I move that we open diplomatic channels to negotiate a permanent peace." The motion was met with a moment of stunned silence, then a chorus of agreement. The vote, when it came, was unanimous. As the council dispersed, each member lost in their own thoughts about the future. Major Sarah Chen slipped away unnoticed. Her mission was complete. Humanity had won not just a battle, but the war itself. Hours later, as Sarah's stealth ship broke orbit around Zentvar, she allowed herself a moment of quiet pride. The human snipers, once seen as primitive soldiers by the Confederation, had reshaped the very nature of galactic warfare. But with that pride came a sobering realization. The galaxy would never be the same. Humanity had proven itself a force to be reckoned with, capable of striking fear into the hearts of even the most advanced civilizations. As her ship entered hyperspace, Sarah wondered what the future would hold. Peace was within reach, but at what cost? And how would humanity use its newfound power and influence in the galactic community? These were questions for diplomats and politicians to wrestle with. For now, Sarah and her fellow snipers had done their duty. They had protected humanity, not through brute force, but through skill, strategy, and an unwavering determination to safeguard their species' future among the stars. The war was over. The age of the human sniper had begun, and the galaxy would never underestimate humanity again. A new understanding. The galactic date was set as year 0 of the new era. One standard galactic year had passed since the Battle of New Horizon and the subsequent ceasefire between humanity and the Confederation. The Armistice of Zentvar, as it came to be known, had ushered in an uneasy peace. Both sides now stood at a crossroads, facing the monumental task of rebuilding trust and establishing a new order in the wake of a conflict that had reshaped the very fabric of interstellar relations. On Earth, in the newly constructed Galactic Concord building in Geneva, representatives from both humanity and the Confederation gathered for the first official peace talks. The atmosphere was tense, filled with a mixture of hope and lingering suspicion. Admiral Elena Rodriguez, now serving as Earth's chief diplomat, took her place at the central podium. Across from her sat High Counselor Vexlora, her scales now a muted blue-green, reflecting the gravity of the occasion. "Distinguished delegates," Elena began, her voice carrying across the hushed chamber, "we gather here today not as victors and vanquished, but as equals seeking a path forward. The conflict between our peoples has shown us the futility of war and the strength that can be found in understanding and cooperation." Vexlora nodded in agreement, her large eyes scanning the room. "Indeed, Admiral Rodriguez, the Confederation has learned a costly lesson about the dangers of underestimating others. We came to your world seeking conquest, and instead found a mirror to our own limitations." As the formal proceedings began, two figures watched from the shadows of the observation gallery. Sergeant Jack Harper and Major Sarah Chen, the snipers who had played pivotal roles in turning the tide of the war, had been invited as silent observers to the peace talks. "Strange, isn't it?" Jack murmured, his eyes never leaving the delegates below. "A year ago, we were ghosts in the night, striking fear into the hearts of the Confederation. Now we're watching diplomats argue over trade agreements and cultural exchange programs." Sarah nodded, a wry smile on her face. "That's the irony of it all. We fought so hard to protect humanity, and in doing so, we changed the very nature of galactic politics." Down on the conference floor, the discussions were heating up. A Taurian delegate, his bovine features set in a scowl, was addressing the assembly. "How can we trust that humanity won't use their unique capabilities to dominate the galaxy?" he demanded. "These snipers of theirs have proven they can penetrate our most secure facilities, neutralize our most powerful weapons. What's to stop them from becoming the very threat they claim to be protecting against?" A murmur of agreement rippled through some of the Confederation delegates. The fear of human snipers was still deeply ingrained in their psyche. Admiral Rodriguez remained calm, her expression resolute. "Delegate Newlock, I understand your concerns, but I would ask you to consider this. Throughout the conflict, human snipers demonstrated not just skill, but restraint. We had the capability to cause far more destruction than we did. Instead, we focused on strategic targets, minimizing loss of life where possible." She paused, letting her words sink in. "Our goal was never domination, but coexistence. The skills and technologies developed by our snipers can be used not just for warfare, but for exploration, for search and rescue, for advancing our understanding of the universe." High Counselor Vexlora raised a hand, her scales shimmering with a pattern that indicated deep thought. "Admiral Rodriguez speaks truth," she said, her voice carrying the weight of personal experience. "I have seen firsthand the capability of human snipers. Had they wished for galactic domination, they could have achieved it. Instead, they sought to end the conflict with minimal bloodshed." The chamber fell silent as delegates pondered this perspective. In the observation gallery, Jack and Sarah exchanged glances. They knew the truth of Vexlora's words. The war could have been far bloodier, far more devastating, had they chosen a different path. As the debate continued, a new voice entered the fray. Dr. Zorak, a renowned Confederation xenobiologist, stepped up to the podium. "Esteemed colleagues," he began, his tentacles waving in a gesture of emphasis, "perhaps we are looking at this situation from the wrong angle. The human snipers have demonstrated abilities that we previously thought impossible. Instead of fearing these capabilities, should we not seek to understand them?" A ripple of curiosity spread through the chamber. Dr. Zorak continued, his voice gaining strength. "I propose a joint research initiative. Let us work together to study the unique adaptations and technologies that humans have developed, not for warfare, but for the advancement of all our species." The proposal sparked intense discussion. Some delegates saw it as an opportunity for genuine cooperation and mutual benefit. Others worried it was a ploy to gain access to human military secrets. In the gallery, Sarah leaned towards Jack. "What do you think? Are we ready to share our secrets with the galaxy?" Jack's expression was thoughtful. "Maybe it's time. We've shown them what we can do as warriors. Perhaps now we need to show them what we can do as partners." As the debate raged on, Admiral Rodriguez raised her hand for silence. "Dr. Zorak's proposal has merit," she said. "Humanity is willing to participate in such an initiative, with appropriate safeguards in place. But we would expand its scope. Let this be not just about understanding human capabilities, but about fostering mutual understanding between all our species. She turned, gesturing towards the gallery where Jack and Sarah sat. I would like to introduce two individuals who exemplify the spirit of what we're discussing. Sergeant Jack Harper and Major Sarah Chen, two of our most decorated snipers. A collective gasp went through the Confederation delegates as Jack and Sarah stood, moving to join Admiral Rodriguez on the conference floor. To many, these two were living legends, the embodiment of the fear that had gripped the Confederation during the war. But as they approached, their demeanor was not threatening. They carried themselves with quiet confidence, their eyes reflecting not hostility, but curiosity and openness. Delegates of the Confederation, Jack began, his voice calm and measured. We stand before you not as enemies, but as fellow sentients seeking understanding. The skills we developed, the technologies we created, these were born out of necessity, out of a desire to protect our people. But they need not be used solely for conflict. Sarah stepped forward, her gaze sweeping across the assembly. Imagine using our stealth technology for deep space exploration, for observing rare cosmic phenomena without disturbing them. Picture our precision targeting systems being adapted for delicate surgical procedures or for navigating treacherous asteroid fields. As they spoke, the atmosphere in the chamber began to shift. Fear and suspicion gradually gave way to curiosity and cautious optimism. High Counselor Vexlora, her scales now shimmering with a pattern of deep blue, indicating profound realization, addressed the assembly. My fellow delegates, I believe we stand at a turning point in galactic history. The conflict with humanity has shown us that there is more to strength than mere firepower or numbers. True power lies in adaptability, in innovation, in the ability to see beyond conventional wisdom. She paused, her gaze meeting Jack's and then Sarah's. These humans before us, once our most feared adversaries, now offer us a hand in friendship. I, for one, believe we should grasp it. The chamber erupted in discussion, but the tone had changed. There was an energy in the air, a sense of possibility that hadn't existed before. As the day wore on, the framework for a new galactic order began to take shape. The Galactic Concord, as it would come to be known, would be founded on principles of mutual respect, shared knowledge, and collective security. Human snipers, once the bogeymen of the Confederation, would take on new roles. Some would become instructors, teaching their unique skills to a new generation of multi-species exploration teams. Others would use their abilities in scientific endeavors, pushing the boundaries of what was possible in fields ranging from astrophysics to xenobiology. As the session drew to a close, Admiral Rodriguez addressed the assembly one final time. Today, we have taken the first steps towards a new future, a future not defined by fear or mistrust, but by cooperation and shared discovery. The road ahead will not be easy. There will be challenges, misunderstandings, and moments of doubt. But if we can maintain the spirit of openness and mutual respect we've shown here today, I believe there is no limit to what we can achieve together. The applause that followed was tentative at first, then grew in strength until it filled the chamber. Delegates from 100 worlds, once bitter enemies, now stood united in a vision of a shared future. As Jack and Sarah made their way back to the observation gallery, they couldn't help but feel a sense of wonder at how far things had come. You know, Jack mused, when I signed up to be a sniper, I never imagined I'd end up as some kind of galactic ambassador. Sarah chuckled. Life's full of surprises, but you have to admit, this is one hell of a new mission. As they watched the delegates below continue their discussions, both felt a mix of pride and humility. They had played their part in reshaping the galaxy, in turning a war of conquest into an opportunity for unprecedented cooperation. The age of the human sniper had indeed begun, but not in the way anyone could have predicted. Instead of shadows and fear, they now brought light and understanding. The skills that had made them lethal warriors would now be used to push the boundaries of exploration and discovery. As the first day of the new era drew to a close, The stars outside seemed to shine a little brighter. The galaxy was entering uncharted territory, a future filled with both challenges and infinite possibilities. And humanity, once the newcomers, the underdogs, now stood ready to help guide the way forward. The hunt was over. The era of cooperation had begun, and the echoes of the sniper's role in shaping this new galaxy would resonate for generations to come.